Welcome in Rose City on this Friday, October 27th, 2023. 1989 Taylor's version playing on the speakers of every home in America. We are here.
That's the Haters Gonna Hate album, right? Haters Gonna Hate. It's that
Shake
one?
It Off.
Shake It Off.
Yes.
That's the one.
Yes, that's the song.
All right. I'm glad I got that right. Have you ever seen the Goats version of that on YouTube? There's a Goat remix of that song. It's phenomenal.
I have not seen that, but that sounds very funny. Okay.
It's good stuff. This episode starting phenomenally as usual.
Yeah, we're off to a brilliant start here. In what is
I'm sorry, I got the song wrong. It's the I Knew You Were Trouble When You Walked In. That's the one with the good Goat remix.
So are they just buying, or what's the
at the part where she emotes verbally? I don't know what I would call what she does. It replaces that, but with like the goats yelling like humans thing. And it's really strong content. It's kind of an oldie, but it's a goodie. From the early days of the memification of the internet. It's really strong. So I'm sorry for that diversion, me getting the song mixed up, but go like get on YouTube, give that a search. It's really strong stuff. I hope she worked it into the re-release.
She did not.
That's a shame.
We've listened to most of it here at the Knight Clark household, and she has yet to. Oh, it's great. I'm not even like a big Taylor Swift fan, as I've said before, but I will say that the re-recorded version of this album, obviously, 9 years later, the production is significantly better, and I think that her voice has evolved in a lot of ways too.
A little more maturity and sophistication to the sound and the presentation.
Certainly.
Nice.
I think it's a very solid record. We've got two different vinyls coming.
Two vinyls.
I bought one for Emma as a gift, and she bought one for herself without of course me knowing at the time. So that's hilarious. But
do y'all have a record player, or do you just collect the vinyls as collector's items?
We do have a record player. For a while we didn't. We were the sort of collector people, but now we got one set up in the living room.
So you spin them.
Yeah, we'll spin some records.
Nice
here.
Nice. Very hipster of you.
Yeah. Speaking of spin, the Portland Timbers just finished just finished off their season and had a end of season press conference.
That was a nice transition,
with
by
Ned
the way.
Grabavoy.
I don't want this to get too far away before I give you your flowers on that. That was a nice transition.
Thank you. Ned Grabavoy spoke yesterday with an eye towards what is going to be a busy offseason for the Portland Timbers. Of course, the Timbers lose on decision day to Houston. All the other things go wrong for them in terms of results around the league, and they miss out on the playoffs. Sporting Kansas City jumps in and ends up winning in the play-in game. So they'll face St. Louis City, a matchup that, the Timbers would not have been mad about if they got in. But given the nature of this season, given a lot of the struggles that they had, I think that it's probably better for the team's future and for the changes that Ned Grabavoy himself admitted need to be made.
There's your spin.
That they didn't make the playoffs. Yeah, there's your spin.
Spinning it like Taylor.
Yeah, spin the record here. And obviously 2 years in a row missing the playoffs, in Ned's words, a major failure. Yeah. Something that, is below the standards of the club for the previous decade of its existence, and is a big reason why they fired Gio Savarese halfway through the season. It's a big reason why they're, seeking a new head coach now, whether it's Miles Joseph or one of the outside candidates. We will find out in the next few days, according to Ned. But there's a lot of roster movement too. Ned himself announced that Aljaž Ivačić had requested a trade, which was pretty well known for a while.
No surprise there. That was
given what happened there.
And even Ned didn't exactly treat that like it was some big revelation. I think even in his comments, it was pretty clear that he regarded that also as not being particularly, newsy news.
Right. It's part of the situation when he was suspended for the final 3 games of the season due to allegedly using threatening language towards staff members, which obviously was the sort of crescendo of this messy situation, to say the least. And so Ivačić is probably gone, if not definitely gone in the offseason. And then Yaroslav Nishkoda, who is recovering from an season-ending ACL tear. He is leaving the club. His option was not picked up. The two other options that the team has to look at, Sebastian Blanco, club legend, and then David Bingham. They have yet to make a decision on those, but according to Ned, Ned and Merritt Paulson have been speaking pretty regularly with Sebastian Blanco and his representation to sort of decide the next steps. My hunch, based on the way that Ned framed it and sort of spoke about doing what's best for the team in the same breath as these Blanco discussions, is that this is probably the end for Sebastian Blanco in a Timbers uniform. He's dealt with pretty debilitating knee issues over the last couple of years, to the point where it's affected his day-to-day life. We talked earlier this year about Seba sharing with me that, he couldn't climb up the stairs at home. He couldn't, play with his kids on the floor because of some of these chronic knee issues. And that's a point in any footballer's career where you sort of have to make a decision that you think is best for you, but also for your family. We'll see where Seba stands in terms of his health, in terms of his desire to maybe play one other year for another club if he so chooses. But it seems to me, and this obviously isn't official yet, that Seba is done with the Timbers. An additional bit of context and newsiness that came out of the last couple of days. Ned, of course, himself did not announce these things, but Dario Zuparich requested a trade, which is obviously a big loss. Somebody who has been an anchor along the back line and one of the hardest working and honestly most quotable people on the Timbers is likely to leave this offseason after requesting a trade. My understanding is that he's upset with the sort of direction of the club the last 2 years and the lack of winning that has occurred, which,
Understandable.
given what's gone on, that would be
Those are
understandable if
feelings
that's the case.
based in fact, I suppose.
And additionally, Jimmy Chara, unlikely to return to the club with a year left on his deal. That's something that we had posited as a possibility.
Maybe, though, the biggest news out of this bunch.
Yes. Yeah. Potentially the biggest news there. Just given, obviously he's Diego's brother, but also he came in as a DP and is still a DP and, did not obviously live up to those expectations. And, is somebody that they're going to look to move on from and add probably one or two DPs this offseason. Like as you pointed out, it would have to be a young DP and then a senior DP. Looking to add a DP attacker, and then just rounding out this laundry list of offseason items, which just sort of all hit the fan at once. Frank Boley is reportedly going to leave. That's according to sources. He declined the club's proposal to return, apparently, and defender Zach McGraw is looking to get a significant pay raise as well. Somebody who is on a pretty low number given the contributions that he gives to this team, so it makes sense that he's after that. But definitely a priority, I'm sure, for the Timbers this offseason. So all that being said, all of those layers upon layers of items, what stands out to you, Chris, as we enter the offseason?
So yeah, let's look forward. I do want to make sure that at some point we will be looking back. But let's look forward first at these issues. The biggest news I think was Jimmy Chara. Obviously had recurring health issues this last year. That the Timbers, given his age and all of that, and how recurring the issues were, the Timbers should be very concerned about. That's something that you don't want to carry a DP into a season, and they've done this in the past. So, this wasn't a foregone conclusion, but you don't want to carry a DP into a season without confidence that he's going to be able to play. And I don't think that there was reason to have a lot of confidence that Jimmy Chara was going to be able to be on the field consistently in 2024, more so than he was in 2023. And even when he was on the field, he was not a particularly impactful player. And this is something that we've been saying for a while. He's a solid player. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to throw dirt on the guy. He's always been a solid player for the Timbers. But in terms of DP level impact, he's really never provided that. And so I actually kind of feel like the decision with respect to Jimmy Chara for 2024 is really similar to the decision that the Timbers had with respect to Yaroslav Nyeshgoda with 2023, right? 1 year left on the contract, mounting health issues, kind of okay, but not great performance. In 2023, the Timbers chose to keep that guy, right? They chose to keep Nyeshgoda and essentially just let his contract expire. But to carry his cap hit and to carry him on the roster over the course of the season. Here, it looks like they're making a different decision with respect to Jimmy Chara. I think if you go back and listen to our podcast from last offseason, you would not have a hard time figuring out where I stood on that decision last year. So frankly, I think it's much more welcome that the Timbers are being more proactive about moving on from Jimmy at this point. Certainly, I hope wherever he goes next, he finds both health and success. But I think that's in terms of harkening back to what Ned said about the need to make these decisions in the best interest of the team. That's one of them, and it's a decision that they didn't make last year. I think we saw how that turned out, and they seem to be doing something different this year. So that's I think very welcome news.
Yeah, and I think that to that point, this is sort of the first cycle through an off season for Ned after this first year at the helm, right? He took over as interim after Gavin Wilkinson's firing last
But they
fall.
left him interim for 3 months.
But they left him interim for a while, and frankly, his office was not filled out. Now, they, as he said, are hiring a director of scouting, and that's been a drawn out process according to Ned. But he's got Jack Dodd in there as a fellow executive to sort of help guide that department and start to get some scouting boots on the ground for that side of things. But in terms of that specific decision and how it squares with the Niasgoda decision, I think Ned is just in a better position now to take that honest approach after obviously a season where it didn't cut it for the club, and fans obviously are upset, and the standards have not been met in the words of Ned Grabavoy. He has more freedom and I think experience in the job now to do this and to say, as he did, look, like, we need to take an honest approach. We need to look at this roster and be willing to make some tough decisions. And some of those decisions are moving on from players that have been at this club either for a while or have been in key roles for this club or were major investments. One player that they're going to bring back that I forgot to note in my laundry list of stuff is Santiago Moreno, who obviously had the transfer request drama earlier this year. Walked it back, got a new agent. The team helped move his mom up from Colombia to Portland on a temporary visa. That's been a huge help for Santi. And there's nothing like mom's cooking and mom's presence in your life to sort of elevate your attitude, your feelings in general. So I'm very happy for Santi and for his mom to be able to witness her son be a professional soccer player after everything she went through raising her kids and Santi went through as a kid growing up in Cali. That's a very compelling and positive story, just as an aside. But
I think I agreed with Ned's comments that in the last 10 games, Santi was the guy who was a different guy than he was in the first 24. And so I think there's reason for hope there that's going to turn out better than it did. Some of the other sort of newsy bits that we got with respect to Zachary McGraw, it is not surprising at all to me that he feels like he deserves more money. The reason he feels like he deserves more money is because he deserves more money. And so that is, again, another feeling like Zuparich's. That's another feeling that's based in fact. And I think I would expect something to get done here because it's really in the Timbers' interest as well to keep a player that as good a quality as Zach has shown, to keep him sort of on a long-term contract in which he's being compensated about what he's producing. And because
he's the type of guy too, that you can mold into, I think, a real like club
Yeah,
guy,
for
right?
sure.
Like a guy that can be, after Diego Chara retires, that can be your captain,
Yep.
that can be a vocal leader, and that can represent, what you want your club's values to be,
And they
right?
need
Is
more of
a
that,
hard,
not
yeah,
less of it.
yeah,
Which
exactly.
I think Ned spoke to as well. I look, not to like hide the ball here. In listening to a lot of Ned's comments, I agreed with most of them. Frankly, I thought I was much more heartened by his comments yesterday than I was what we were hearing out of that the front office toward the beginning of the year, near the end of last offseason. I think these were much more clear eyed. But I mean, getting back to the point about McGraw, because the Timbers don't have to pay any acquisition cost for him, they can pay him what he deserves in terms of salary and still achieve relative value for him. And so, I mean, that's just something that where everybody's interests here should align to getting McGraw bumped up in terms of salary, keeping him happy, keeping him here for the long term for the club. So I expect that to happen. And if the club is saying that he is requesting that, I expect that that's an indication that they also are amenable to doing that. So I expect that to get done. With respect to Blanco, it's an interesting question. Obviously, he is a free agent, and we knew his contract was going to be up at the end of the year. Uh, it's going to be interesting to see what decision Seba makes, because I mean, look, he was after he got back and fit, he made a lot of appearances, right? He made 17 appearances over the course of the season. He was available in lots of games. So it's not like he had recurring injury issues, but he still only played 427 minutes. And if your expectations for 2024 are anything different or anything higher than that, you're unrealistic. And so, I think Blanco probably has some decision making to do in terms of what he wants to do and what's right for him in 2024. I'm not opposed to the idea of, if he wants to play in 2024 and if he is willing to take a reasonable salary number. It's not going to be the 1.6 million that he was making this last year. In fact, it's probably not going to be 1/5 of that. Um, but if he's willing to play another year for a number that the Timbers can work into the salary cap without, you know, losing their ability to do other things, I do think there's value in having somebody like Sebo Blanco on the team, even if he's not playing a ton. Um, the Timbers are going next year. It seems to have a lot of young players, to have a lot of players who are new to MLS, and so having a guy like him on the team has value. Uh, Even if it's not necessarily value that you can pay $500,000 or $600,000 for within the confines of the salary cap. And so we'll see. I guess I probably land about where you land, which is that I think it's likelier than not that he won't return. But we'll see what his preferences are and whether they can get to a point. I mean, if they can get him on a contract next year for $250,000 or something like that, I think that's pretty justifiable. But I don't know if Seba wants to do that. I don't know if that's in his interests, and if not, I will be a little bit sad because Blanco has been a tremendous contributor to the club over his time here. I mean, he's been in Portland now for what, 7-8 years, um, and his contributions have been fantastic, plain and simple. And I would be somewhat regretful that fans didn't sort of have the opportunity to give him the send off that he deserves, um, and to give him the respect and the flowers that I think his overall contributions to the club warrant. So I'll be a little bit sad about that. If this is the end, it feels like it kind of an anticlimactic, like just kind of just happened end. But it's also just the difficulty of managing these late career stages and getting everybody aligned in terms of when things are going to ramp down. That's hard in most cases.
Yeah,
Um,
it's hard to tell competitors like, Seba too. Even if he understands the reality of the situation, it's hard for people like that to walk away. Um, Yeah, I just started watching Ted Lasso. In fact, for the
Really?
people in yeah, I just started. I finished season 1,
Huh.
and I'm in the midst of season 2 currently. And you know, spoiler alert for those who, like me, have
Don't need
taken
to do spoiler alert.
forever to
We're
get
all
to
caught
this.
up. You're the one who's behind.
I'm the one who's behind. I think about Roy Kent, and I think about the end of his career in that show, and frankly, I sat there and it made me, not to compare the two, because one is a fictional character with fictional ambitions and fictional emotions, and the other is a real human being with these this entire career that he's built in soccer. But it reminded me of Saban. It reminded me of the type of competitor he is, and how difficult it is for any competitor to step away from the game and to sort of listen to their body. It's only Seba knows where he's at right now, and if he's able to sort of lace up the boots again next year, whether it's here or Argentina or somewhere else. Um, it's going to be ultimately up to him, but I think he has a really strong foundation in place with his family and the people around him, the friendships he's built, that um, he'll be good. And he's unquestionably. I mean, you have to look at what he's done for the club, and the sort of you know cult hero that he became with the Chucky mask and everything else, like all the crazy,
By the
exciting,
way, just the
fiery
wrong nickname.
moments.
Just the wrong nickname. It should have been Lil Sebastian all along.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that's
We did it
probably
wrong.
probably more
We
more
blew it.
his that's more probably his lack of desire to be called Lil Sebastian than
Bye,
maybe.
bye, Lil Sebastian. I'll miss you in the saddest fashion. It's great stuff. It's good stuff.
TA never did that.
I mean, it never had the opportunity. If nothing else, they should
Hmm.
bring him back on a 1-day contract so we can sing in that song.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably a guy that's going to go in the Ring of Honor, right?
I think he probably gets there. Maybe not sort of a first ballot Ring of Honor guy like Diego Valeri, but I think he's got a good case.
Yeah, Chara would probably
Chara
be
gets there
put in
first.
there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Chara gets there first. I mean, and this is an impossible standard to hold anybody to, but yeah, I mean, I think there are. I think in terms of Timbers MLS history, there's the top two, right? There's the Diegos, and then third, I think is fairly unquestionable is Seba in terms of influence over the course of this period, and so I don't want to take anything away from him by comparing him to the Diegos, because the Diegos stand alone, or at least together, but separate from everybody else. But in terms of the non-Diego category, I mean, he's certainly up there. So yeah, I mean, I'm very much open to Blanco being a Ring of Honor inductee, but not sort of a no-brainer like Valeria or Chara.
Yeah, and they're filling up that space over there, pretty quickly with modern people, and will fill it up as when Chara steps away, whether that's like 2 years from now or 5 years, who knows? The guy is just ageless. But but they also have to, add names unquestionably to the Portland Thorns section. Christine Sinclair's will obviously be the first one
Yep,
after next year, and then there will be more unquestionably in the
there will be
future.
more.
But speaking to this offseason and speaking ahead to sort of, the changes and the new people that Ned talked about wanting to bring in for the Timbers, the targeting a DP attacking player is something that they've spoken about privately for a while, is something that they want to kind of
It's
get rolling
something they've
here.
spoken about basically each of the last several off seasons. So
Right. And so now is sort of the moment when you're saying that we will be in the market to look at DP attacking players, that you do that. They're also looking to add depth along the back line. Obviously, you expect that not only will Dario Zuparic be gone, but Larry Smabiala at his age and career stage likely would not be back either. They haven't said either way, and sources haven't told me either way what's going to happen with Larry's, but it's pretty plain that, given the point in his career, that it's probably not going to be with the Timbers next year. So you've got Zach and Miguel Araujo, and that's pretty much it for your
And
center
yeah,
backs
I
right
mean,
now.
I think given the little that we saw from Araujo this year, you're probably looking to bring in a starting level center back and basically you have Zach, and then allow Araujo and then whoever you sign to compete for the second spot with the option to play in a 3-back setup, if everybody sort of warrants a starting spot. And the ability to do that. I think it's more than a depth piece that they're going to have to look for in central defense. I think they're going to have to make some different decisions, at least in terms of depth at the fullback positions. I don't think that's a position, especially over the course of the season, that acquitted itself particularly well defensively. And there are different things tactically that they can do to help out there, but frankly, I don't think you want to constrain somebody like Mosquera too much by sort of pinning him in. And so I think at least in terms of the depth positions at fullback, they're going to have to reinforce there. The attacking positions are interesting. With Boley not coming back, they obviously need to make a playing level signing at number 9, somebody who you can give 15, 20 starts to and feel okay about that.
But and you imagine that would be the DP.
Maybe.
Right? I mean, yeah.
Felipe Mora played really well. Better than I expected, frankly, when he got back. And so it's interesting because that number 9 position is I agree with you, sort of the most, I guess, the easiest position to say, yes, they should go out and sign a DP at that spot. But that would cut off Felipe Mora from being a regular starter. And I'm not sure that's warranted. If he's going to be healthy and if he's going to be in the form that he showed over the course of the last 10 or 12 games, Mora showed that he was a starting level number 9.
Yeah, and if you put the right and highly talented, like, attacking midfielder right behind him, I mean, that to me, when you're talking about a move that isn't a number 9, makes the most sense too, particularly given that you tried to sort of, slot Evander in there and it turned out that he's better served, a little further back.
Yeah, I don't think you can play
that makes
Evander
a lot of sense.
too much deeper. My opinion of Evander is largely the same as when he came in. That he looks like he is in a system where you've got sort of a 3-man central midfield. It looks to me like if you've got sort of a 6 and 2/8 system, he's the most advanced 8. That's who he is. If you want to talk about the U.S. men's national team, he's your Weston McKennie. And I think they have some pretty sensible choices for the other 2 players in that central midfield. The guy who I can't get in there and who I think is going to be a big decision for the Timbers this offseason, at least is one that they should be thinking about proactively, even though conditions for moving him are not optimal, is Eric Williamson. I think Evander and Eric Williamson are basically the same type of player. And I think they're both pretty good. I think it's not optimal to move a guy coming off a long-term injury like Williamson is. But I don't see a way, while maintaining sort of defensive balance in central midfield, to play both Evander and Williamson at the same time. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I was not proven wrong when those 2 did play together early in this season. I was very much proven correct in that concern, because that was a huge problem. And that was mooted somewhat by the fact that Williamson got hurt. But I don't know how that dynamic works. I think when you look at the wings, that is another position where it probably makes sense. I think the Timbers have some potential there. Santiago Moreno, obviously, if he comes in and is sort of the guy who we saw over the course of the last couple months of the season, you would expect him to be a regular starter. But look, I mean, we can't completely ignore the 24 games that preceded that. And so I don't think you would say that Moreno is a sure bet.
Also, speaking to Moreno, I think that, you could argue, and this is something he has pushed for privately, that, maybe he's the person that you slot in as that sort of quasi number 10.
Then where do you put Evander?
And then you make that major investment in the winger, and then keep Evander sort of, back a little
as the
further.
central 8. You're going to get torn up because Evander didn't defend consistently. He did sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. I think there were stretches that were
you can't have a situation where you've got a 6 and then 2 8s/10s who don't defend. or don't reliably defend. You need somebody who's going to reliably do that defensive work to pair with your number six.
Yeah, I mean, Paredes and Chara are like unmoving pieces of this. They
Yeah.
speak so highly now of Paredes that like they see him as an essential part of the long term future here. They declined a pretty serious like $2 million offer from a team in Brazil for him. Like
Yeah. And I would have
they're
declined that offer too.
yeah, they're sticking with him. So that's the rub, right? That's why it's difficult to sort of map out where that DP attacking player would fit and who they would sort of slot out in order for it
I mean,
to
the
work.
other spot that I think would make sense is a really high quality wide forward. Because I mean, the two guys who you have, I mean, if you keep sort of the 4-3-3 sort of basic setup that this roster is built for right now, although they can reconstruct it. Don't get me wrong. They would just have to make some different choices. But that 4-3-3 setup that the roster is built for right now, I think those wing positions are probably the weakest because you've got Antony on one side. And look, I mean, we saw about 90 minutes of good soccer from Antony this year, which is not a criticism. That's basically what we saw from Santi Moreno his first year. It is difficult for young players to come in and make an immediate impact. He didn't have a ton of runway. The fact that we saw 90 minutes or so of really good soccer from Antony suggests that there's something there.
Yeah, and
And
I think the potential is absolutely there for him,
yeah,
just in terms of his athletic ability and what he could bring.
but are you looking at Antony as an in-pin starter in 2024? You're absolutely not, right? You're not doing that. And so I think that's a wide forward is a spot that would make some sense to sign a DP attacking player. But they would need to add sort of at least another number 9 to compete with and be depth for Mora, especially given Mora's injury issues. And frankly, they don't have a ton of other great options at those wide for at those wing spots, right? Dyrone Asprilla was a guy who I think is not the contributor that he was in say 2021 when he was excellent. And that happens. I mean, he's kind of just at that stage of his career, but did not find that kind of form again. I think you probably keep Asprilla around, but you're not counting on Asprilla to start a ton of games, and you probably shouldn't be. And so that's the spot that if it's me, I would probably look to target with that DP signing. But I think they also have a number of hard decisions to make in central midfield. I think Ned alluded to one, which is whether to bring back Brian Acosta. I think the Timbers should decline his option because his option is almost certainly at a little bit higher salary than Acosta was on this year. And he's expensive, right? He was like the 6th or 7th most expensive guy on the roster. He's over the designated the TAM threshold in terms of salary, and he's just not that player. But if you can bring him back on for $300,000 or something like that, where you can justify him being a depth piece, I think he performed at that to that level, and that would make sense. You're working David Ajala back in. He is the guy who the Timbers have pegged as sort of the successor at that number 6 position to Diego Chara. You hope certainly that he's going to be back ready to go around the beginning of camp or sometime around there to be back to full health. And frankly, we saw some pretty good stuff from him in short minutes this year. So frankly, I think that's where the roster logjam is, that they kind of have to figure out what they're going to do and how to alleviate that logjam and sort of have a clear structure within that group to figure out how they're going to play. And this is all the kind of stuff that I think a coach is critical for, right? Because how your coach wants to set up that central midfield is going to dictate a lot of those decisions. And that's why I've been anxious for the Timbers to make the coaching hire so that they can make these offseason roster moves in a way that aligns with how the new coach wants to play. And so hopefully they do make that decision in the next week or so. Hopefully they make a good decision. I think there are some that might not be great decisions, but whatever, hopefully they make a good decision there. And that coach has the opportunity to sort of help shape the roster within their vision of how they want to play.
Of those candidates, I mean, there are some that are, obviously putting up red flags for a lot of
Yeah.
people
I
in this
mean, that was
community.
not a compelling list as we discussed last week.
But there are names on there that have seemed like more logical choices to fans and to people on the outside maybe than others. The idea that whoever is hired, if it's not Miles, which given the team's performance at the end of the season and not making the playoffs, it seems less likely now that Miles would be the hire than it was, when they were at the peak of this sort of late season turnaround. But whoever that hire is, it feels like almost an edict from the organization that, regardless of who gets hired, Miles and Ridgie probably have to be at least some part of that coaching
Shouldn't be an
staff, right?
edict.
Yeah,
Shouldn't be
yeah.
an edict. I mean,
It shouldn't be, but it might be.
yeah, but it
Is the
shouldn't be.
thing just
And
okay?
look, I mean, I think Miles and his staff in the last 10 games did a good job. Wasn't perfect. It shows some cracks at the end, but they did a good job, and they deserve respect and credit for that. I don't think Miles should get the permanent job, and that really has less to do with his performance as interim manager and more to do with the fact that this is a club that is just, I mean, I'll say it, just desperate at this point for an infusion of fresh ideas and new leadership. I think the club just needs that. I don't think they can afford to make another internal hire in a position as prominent as this. And I mean, if Miles's work had just knocked me off my feet, had been 10 out of 10 no notes, maybe you reconsider that because the candidate that you just have is just too strong. It wasn't that. It was more 7 out of 10. Still good. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't that. And so I think the need for new leadership and new ideas, and not having some of the baggage from just some of the things that have gone on within the club in the last few years is really critical just for the health of the club. And so I don't think they should hire Miles Joseph. I think it's possible that they will, in no small part because the other candidates whom we know that they've been talking to have been less than compelling. They each have some warts on them, to say the least, in some instances. And so maybe they don't have a lot of other attractive choices. But I'm a big believer, assuming that they do go outside to make this hire, as I think they should. And to be clear, we also don't know everybody who's in consideration. It's always been sort of out there that there are other names in consideration. So, we can only talk about those whom we've seen. But who knows? Maybe
There was one.
maybe
in
Zinedine Zidane is
maybe Diego
the dark
Valeri.
horse.
Maybe Diego Valeri, who just got his coaching license,
Yeah,
is the dark horse.
But I mean,
no.
Assuming they do go outside, I am a very big believer that a coach should be allowed to make to build their own staff. And look, I mean, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with the Timbers saying, hey, we've had Liam Ridgewell here. We've had Miles Joseph here. These are two guys whom we believe in. And if you want them on your staff, we will make that happen. But I don't think it's a good idea to hire a coach and then handcuff them with people on their staff whom they may or may not want. I think that's a bad idea. And so, I too would like to see Joseph back because I think he showed that he is somebody who has some ideas that can contribute and that can be part of a good coaching staff. I think Liam Ridgewell too. Those are guys whom I would like to see back. But it's kind of just how it goes sometimes. Even when you have an assistant who you like and who you think has potential, if the head coach leaves and you bring in somebody new, sometimes you do just lose those guys. And that's okay. Sometimes they come back, right? I mean, sometimes they get another job. And I think both Ridgewell and Joseph would get other jobs in MLS pretty easily. Sometimes they go to other jobs, they get a few more years of experience, and then sometimes they come back as head coaches. when they've got a couple more notches on their belt. But I don't think it's a good idea to dictate to any hire whom they need to hire to have on their staff.
Right. And in terms of the most likely person or people that would keep those two guys on staff, the logical one in my mind is if they hire Robin Fraser, and he has a long-standing relationship with Miles dating back to the RSL days, when I believe they were both assistant coaches at that time. So as part of a larger staff, which would obviously include new people, that seems like the scenario under which Miles and Ridgie would be most likely to stay. Weirdly, just given how things are structured and sort of the importance of each individual coach and their specialty, I feel like it's almost more likely that somebody like Ridgie stays on a staff as an assistant than maybe Miles does, because maybe Miles
Maybe.
sees an opportunity with another club where either he's got a track to be the head coach there, or has a more prominent role than maybe he would under Coach X or whoever they end up hiring in Portland. But by that same token, Miles, I think, really has a love and appreciation for a lot of the guys in this locker room, and has developed a strong relationship with a lot of them.
Yeah, and look, this isn't to say this is Ridgewell's fault, and it's not to say that I don't think Ridgewell did a good enough job to warrant coming back. I think both of those things. This team also conceded 10 goals in the last 3 games of the season. Like, it's not like they started pitching shutouts regularly when Ridgewell sort of rose in prominence after Gio left. So yeah, I mean, let's keep that in the proper context. They gave up 10 goals in the final 3 games of the season, and that's why they're not playing soccer anymore.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a Roy Kent type character, Liam Ridgewell.
Yeah, that's right. That's
but,
right. So
anyway.
I mean, I think. Is there anything that I saw from the last 10 games that makes me think that either of them are sort of like slam dunk, you absolutely need to have this guy back kinds of folks? No. Are they guys whom you would like to see back? Yes, absolutely. And can they contribute to a good coaching staff? Yes. If that's not the direction though that the new coach wants to go, I don't think you tell them that they have to do something. Because
who do you think is the most likely then of the candidates?
Look, it's impossible for me to get in the head of Merritt Paulson and Ned Grabavoy in making this decision. Obviously, that's where the decision's being made, and it's not like there is a connection between our brains. I'll put it that way. So I don't know which direction they're thinking of going. Of the names that we've seen, and I underline of the names that we've seen because there, as I mentioned, there are names we haven't. I agree with you that Robin Fraser is the one that interests me the most. But like Fraser's got some warts on him too. The last 2 years in Colorado were not good. And there are definitely other reasons for that. Don't, I mean, there's that at that club, especially, there are other reasons for that. And I am curious about, Robin Fraser, unfortunately, in the 2 head coaching jobs that he's had, has been saddled with the 2 probably least ambitious clubs in recent MLS history, in the Colorado Rapids and Chivas USA. And there have been times in which those teams have played well under his leadership, but they've also not played well under his leadership. And so like there's kind of a curiosity of like, boy, what would it be like if Robin Fraser got a job at a place that like had some ambition to do something? So I acknowledge that there's that curiosity. I have it too. But I think it's an open question, and whether you want to sort of take that risk as with your club, or would rather somebody else do that experiment, is a reasonable question. That said, of the names that I've seen, that's the one that I'm most interested in terms of how that could go. If that was my list of candidates and I was making the hire, that's probably the direction I'd go.
The other candidates on the list being Ezra Hendrickson, Dome Torrent, Miles, and Phil Neville, and also an unnamed An unnamed League MX
Yeah,
coach.
I mean, I can't comment on that
So
because you have no idea who the
sure.
coach is from Liga MX. That is the relevant information. The fact that somebody coached in Liga MX isn't exactly like, you know, doesn't make them a slam dunk in terms of a hire. Domain Torrent is interesting as well. I don't know. I mean, it is interesting, but like kind of left MLS under weird circumstances, and frankly, has done nothing in the last 3 years. Lasted less than 6 months at 2 jobs. I think one at Flamenco, if I'm remembering right, in Brazil, and then another at Galatasaray in Turkey. Um, Lasted less than 6 months in both of those, and that's what he has done this decade. So, so that I mean that isn't exactly a clear hire. I would probably go Frazier over him. Ezra Hendrickson is, I think, universally regarded as a really good person, has had some success as an assistant coach. Chicago Fire under him were an absolute dumpster fire, and that is a roster that actually has some money invested into it. Lots of issues on the sporting side of that club as well that may not necessarily be attributable to him, but coming out of that job, that was not a situation, I think, where anybody was saying, boy, that guy should immediately be gobbled up as somebody who's going to warrant being a good MLS head coach. Phil Neville, as the Raspberry suggests, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Repeatedly failed soccer coach. Also, lots of reporting about maybe not a great human. Absolutely not.
Of course, for context, for people who may not be aware of the non-soccer side of things, which we can talk at length about sort of the various spots that Phil Neville's been at the last few years and the lack of success that he's had there, and Chris has been, you know, on record with those things. But additionally, you know, and what he's hinting to here is the off-field concerns with Phil Neville, and something that, you know, there's just not a whole lot of appetite for in Portland from the fan base after everything that's gone on with the club the last couple of years. Neville, you know, posted frankly extremely sexist stuff on Twitter, and was criticized for it and apologized and everything else. But I mean, it's not like they were tweets from when he was like a 13-year-old kid.
No.
And when he was in his 20s, he got flack for it. He was very much an adult, not terribly younger than he was at the time of apology, fully formed prefrontal cortex. I mean, just said stuff that was inexcusably and ridiculously sexist, like almost cartoonishly sexist. And whether he carries those attitudes or not, like, it's not for me to say. I don't know the man. But putting stuff like that on the internet at any time in the history of the internet as a grown adult, like, is just, it's ridiculous, and something that
grown grass adult.
Yeah, front of mind for people in this city, and in particular a city that is such a hub of success in women's soccer, and you know, we know about the lack of success for Neville in that realm. That's not to say
I mean, England got manifestly better after he left.
Like, right. And so, you know,
Miami,
that's,
I mean, you know, Miami's a little bit different story because some other things happened, messy, etc. after he left. But like, they were awful under him. Right. Awful. Terrible. The worst, I mean, this is again an objective fact. The worst team in the league. Even though they had a roster that, although flawed, and everybody agrees was flawed, should not have been a worst team in the league roster. Phil Neville made him the worst team in the league. I don't really want to see him come do the same in Portland.
It would be interesting in terms of that being the decision.
Absolutely not. As I said last week, if the Timbers hire Phil Neville, we're going to have a non-family show episode.
And of course, I won't advocate either way for any candidate.
Don't hire
Phil Neville. In terms
of
my job. This is the difference between me and Chris outlined right here is, you know, our ability to sort of advocate versus not advocate. But there are a lot of questions that would need to obviously be answered by the organization, by Neville himself, if that were to happen. I don't see it happening given everything that's gone on
I don't
in the
see
last
it happening,
couple of
but
years.
Frankly, I was a little bit shocked to even see his name come up in that list.
It is interesting because
Neville
those type of lists.
Maybe Neville himself was sort of seeding that, and that didn't come from the Timbers. Maybe they regard him as less of a candidate than was presented. But I mean, he doesn't get to the resume screen for me, let alone become a finalist.
So we'll see which among the finalists, if any of the ones that have been announced publicly, the Timbers end up hiring. That announcement should be coming probably next week, according to Ned Grabavoy. So that's something to keep an eye on. Next week, of course, we'll be back to probably talk about that, but also talk about the more important thing leading into that weekend, which is the Portland Thorns are going to be hosting a NWSL semifinal match against Gotham. Kind of a sketchy matchup, but interesting
But one that the
and
Thorns
compelling.
managed well just a few weeks ago at home.
Exactly. Yeah, and they did well a few weeks ago, and we will get into all the details of that next week. This week, more of the Timbers post-mortem. Next week, we'll dive in head first into the NWSL playoffs as the Thorns seek their 4th NWSL title. So keep an eye out for that next week. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerMaidenPDX, at Ryan T. Clark, at Chris Reifer. Like us, subscribe to us wherever you get your pods. Any parting thoughts?
Absolutely. Please don't hire Phil Neville. That's it. That's my last thought.
Thank you, Chris, for your candid analysis as always. And make sure to, if you have not yet, please leave us a review wherever you get your pods. Love to hear back from people. Constructive criticism, complete and unrelenting adoration, whatever you want to provide, we are here for it. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next week.